Hello and welcome to part 4 of this H3VR modding tutorial. In this part we're going to be setting up some of the moving parts for our gun and also the physics, the collisions for the gun. So we'll go ahead and get started, and the first thing I want to do is kind of line up the prefab for our gun with our mesh. And we'll go ahead and open this up. And we'll just start going through some of the physics boxes. This is a bit tedious, but we'll just kind of line those up so that it better fits our mesh. Thickness is good. And you kind of get the idea. So this part we might speed through because the idea is that you just line these boxes up with your mesh, and it'll be different for your case. So one thing that we want to keep in mind with this grip is that we actually have a mag L. So what I'm actually going to do is going to make sure that there's a hole in our collider so that we can actually insert a mag. Oh, that didn't copy. Get that. Alright, so I think that's a pretty good representation of the physics for our object, at least for the gun. We haven't done the stock yet, but we'll get to that. So I think the next thing we should go ahead and do is figure out this bolt. Also, we can go ahead and make this stuff outside of the mesh. This is the mesh of the gun. We'll go ahead and drag this in. This is the body of the old gun, so we can delete this old mesh. And then we'll go ahead and grab the bolt. Oh, and we want to make sure that we grab the dark plane. Bring this in. That's not going to move. We'll bring in the bolt. And here is the old bolt for the gun. There's an old mesh that we can remove off of this. And what we'll do is we will align this and then make the mesh a child of it. So let's go ahead and move this into position. And we'll put that right where you would grab the bolt of the. That looks good. Then we'll go ahead and move the mesh into there. And now when you move the bolt, the mesh moves with it. So we have that set up now. The next thing we want to do is have a look at some of these points. We have these position points. We have this one, we'll move together with that. And that looks good. So these are the positions of the bolt. This is like when it's moving back and forth. We have the forward and the rearward point, and we have a lock point. So what we actually want to do is make this accurate to our new bolt position. And the easiest way to do that is to basically come up here and copy the component for the position. And then this is the forward point, so we'll go ahead and select that and then paste those values. And now we have the bolt. That's where it will end up. And so we'll do the same thing for the rearward point. Well, what we want to do is move this back about as far as we imagine the bolt would go back. I think there's good. And then we copy this point and then paste that value into there. And so if we copy the rearward point position and go back to the bolt and paste that, we'll see that the bolt has now moved back to the front of the gun. And actually, it looks like it could move a bit further forward. Should adjust that. We'll go ahead and copy that position, go back to the forward point, and paste that value. So now that's accurate to where it would be. And the last one that we have is the lock point. So this is relevant if your gun holds open on an empty magazine, and it is also the point that after your gun passes it, that's when a bullet is ejected from your magazine. Or no, from the chamber. So what we want to do is, that's probably where the bolt would lock open. So we'll copy that position and put that as the position for the locked rear. And now we have all of the positions set up for the bolt. Go ahead and set it back to the forward point. And we can go in here. This is inside the gun component. We'll see that we have, where is it? Actually, I don't think it's in there. Yeah, we have the points are on the bolt component itself. So that's where they're referenced. The next thing that we can go ahead and do is move on to the bullet positions. So this is the points that the bullet travels through as it's being animated in the gun, when it's like taken out of the magazine and put in the chamber. So we're gonna need something to show us those bullet positions. And since this is a 9mm gun, we can go ahead and import a 9mm round. So we haven't imported ammunition, but actually, if we go into this and go to the prefab that we had, we can go to magazines and select the magazine for that. 91 mag. Actually, I just remembered this gun, the magazine we just spawned uses 9x18, so we don't want that one. We want something else, something that uses 9x19, because that's the caliber for our gun. So we'll go ahead, select one of the MP5s. That spawned in somewhere. We'll put that here, and you can see that there's already some bullets that we can use in here for visibility. So we can go to Viz, and we have these bullets here. Go ahead and copy one of those and bring it out. Gun. So now we can go ahead, and I'm going to hide the bolt because that's going to get in the way. And we can, where did the bullet go? We can take this bullet and put it at the point of mag exit. That's where we'll start. And we'll set that position to 0. So that's where the bullet will start exiting the magazine when the bolt closes. And we want to put that basically right at the tip of where the magazine would be when it's inserted in the gun. So I think that's pretty good. And you want to make sure that this is set to 0 for the bullet, because that's the position that it'll be in when it's made a child of that. So the next thing we want to do is set the position when it's in the chamber. So we'll select the chamber object, and we will bring that over here, and we'll move the bullet into the chamber, and again 0 that position out. And now you just want to kind of adjust it to where you imagine the chamber would. I think that's okay. Actually, the barrel of this is pretty low. I think that's lined up. So we should actually make sure that it makes sense for our mag exit. So we'll go ahead and copy that and set that to 0. So we have 2 bullets. Yeah, so we want to maybe move this down a bit. And so the bullet will travel into the chamber. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. Actually, no, we'll keep that. And we'll move this one into the ejecting position. So we'll 0 that out. And now this is the position when the bullet is being pulled out of the chamber and about to be ejected out of the gun. So I think there's pretty good. It should probably be straight from the barrel. So the bolt will come back, and that's the farthest back the bullet will come. And the last part is the ejection position. So we'll go ahead and 0 this out. And we will move this. This is the point where the bullet spawns when it is being ejected from the gun. So you want to put that outside, and that's where the bullet will start flying when it's finally ejected. I think that's good. I think you want to make sure that it's not inside of a box collider for any of these, or else it can act weird, so we'll just do that. It's 0'd out, good. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. We'll get rid of the other 9mm, and now it is set up. We should also make sure that we change our round type for the chamber while we're here. So we'll select 9x19. And while we're at it, we can also change that on the gun itself. 9x19. So now we've changed that. What is next? The next thing that we can do is go ahead and set up the trigger. So the trigger is pretty easy, depending on what kind of trigger your gun has. I'm just going to have this one be a rotating trigger. So we'll go ahead and move this trigger mesh into here. And we can remove this old trigger mesh. But we'll keep the component, and we'll name that container, just because it's easier. And now we'll treat this as the point that the trigger rotates around. So if we move the mesh into there, and then let's 0 out the rotation. Now when we adjust those values, that's how it's going to rotate. And that looks pretty good. Another thing for setting up this trigger is we can go into the gun and scroll down to the trigger config. And the values that you care about are the trigger forward and the trigger rearward. Forward is 0, that's fine. That's the when you're not pressing the trigger, and that's, I think, this position. And 20 is what it's currently at. We'll go ahead and see what that looks like. That's for the X value. So it goes between that. I think that's fine. So we'll set that back to 0. If your gun uses a trigger that's like a straight pull, you would use translate, and you would want to change the axis to probably Z, but that's for another gun. Another thing that we can set up is now the safety. This is a moving component, so we'll go ahead and find wherever the fire selector is. I might be blind. Here we go. So this is the fire selector position from the old gun. We'll move that up here, and we'll make sure that we are aligning that properly, we'll go into isometric mode. And that looks pretty good. And we'll go ahead and zero that out. So now we can move the safety into that, and we'll select that as fire selector container. And we'll change that to fire selector. So now this is what's going to rotate when you change the firing mode on the gun. So we want to make sure that that is set up in here. We'll go to fire selector config, and this is the main one, so that's what we'll be looking at. And we have these 3 modes. So I know that this, I'm pretty sure, is safe, and so we'll set that as the rotation. Let's see what it is right now. This one. And we'll go ahead and remove these. So this is safe at 0, so we'll remember to set that. This, I'm going to go ahead and say that's single fire. We'll make that a nice clean number. That's 24. So now we'll go back into the gun with those values in mind. So safe is 0, single is 24. And now let's go have a look at a full auto position. How about 47? So we'll set that to 47. And that's pretty much all you're going to want to set. You want to make sure that you have the firing selector starting on whatever mode you want it to start on. So fire selector mode 0 would be safe. And we'll go ahead and set this to the safe position. So let's get out of isometric mode. All right, so that's the firing selector. The next thing that we can go ahead and do is the suppressor mount. This is pretty simple. You just want to line that back up and have that at a point that makes sense. This point is basically where the suppressor would start. That's where it attaches to. And so anything beyond this point is going to be suppressor. I think that's pretty okay. So that's the suppressor mount. We also want to move the muzzle into a good position. So we'll go ahead and grab that and have that right at the tip of the gun. That's the muzzle. The next thing that we can go ahead and do is the stock. This is a bit of a big one. It's got a lot of rotation that we need to account for. And we'll go ahead and start by finding the original stock off of this gun. There we go. So this is the original stock. We'll remove these components. And the first thing that we want to do is we're going to take all of this outside of the stock component so that we can align the pivot point for it. So we'll go ahead and go into isometric mode, and we want to move this point basically right to where the stock is going to pivot at, and also make sure that so we have that set up, and now we can go ahead and move this stuff back into the stock. And when we rotate this, it's gonna make sense where it rotates from, and we don't have the mesh in there. We'll go ahead and move the mesh in here as well. There we go. So that makes sense how it rotates. And now we want to set up these physics for our own mesh. So what we're going to do is just go through these colliders. And I think I'm not going to set these as colliders. I'm just going to do the bar. So we'll get rid of this. And this is the same thing that we did. Oh, with the object physics. So you just kind of line it up how you go ahead and apply this. Does weird stuff. There we go. One thing to keep in mind is that this end piece is going to rotate on its own. So you want to make sure that you keep the physics for that on the part that rotates. Alright, so that's good enough for now for the physics. Bit dirty, but that's fine. The next thing that we'll do for the stock is set the grab point so that it makes sense. But we want to make sure that it's not overlapping with where you would grab the front of the gun. Otherwise, when you grab the front of the gun, you're just going to unfold the stock. Go ahead. Maybe we'll move it in front. Spot for the stock. How do I want to do? What we could do is we could have it. We could have it on the top. And we'll go ahead and make that a child of the moving part so that, well, that's not how it's going to rotate, but that end grab bit will rotate with the gun. So now that we have the physics all set up and the interaction, we'll go ahead and set up some of the basic rotation for this stock. So we had it starting at 0, so that's what our start is going to be. And we'll just rotate this out. And we'll see how far we want that to go. And you might want to look at reference pictures to see what your gun does. Let's see. I can see that the gun, the stock pretty much lines up with the trigger at that point, so that's what we're going to do. We'll have that down there. And that's negative, we'll make it negative 190. And we'll want to go in and copy that value, go into the gun. No, not into the gun, into the grab point. This is where your code for the stock lives. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll change this min rotation to be the smaller value, and the max value is the 0 when it's folded. And we want the starting position to be closed, and this is min closed is how we kind of tell it what position is what. So 0 is the closed position, and 190 is open. So the min is 190, and that's not closed. So we'll leave that unchecked. The next thing that we can do is make this folding bit that folds out of the end of the stock. Set that up. So we'll go into isometric view again and line that position. And this we'll call the stock end. And we'll go ahead and move that into it and also the mesh. So this is all just inside of the end. And if we rotate that, that's not right. So we have a bit of a situation where the mesh that we have everything as a child of actually has a rotation already. And that's okay, but we want to make sure that the rotating parts themselves, like the root components, have a 0 rotation. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this the stock end, and we will put that in here. And now the mesh and the rotating bit are separated. And we can go ahead and actually pull these back out. This was a bit preemptive. We'll pull these back out and make sure that this is at the right position. Go into good. And now we'll go ahead and move these back into the stock end. Now, when we rotate the X, it makes sense. So we'll rotate that there. That looks pretty good. Looks accurate to the picture. And we'll save that as 100. That position is unfolded. That position is folded. So that's what we want when it's all the way out. We'll go to the grab point. And since -190 is all the way out, we want to go to this and set that to match the rotation of the end piece that we want. So when the stock is at -190, the end piece is at 100. And when the stock is closed at 0, the end piece is closed at 0. We also want to make sure that we actually assign the end piece. So we'll go ahead and drag that in here. Now that's the end stock. And now if we set this to 0, set the stock end to 0, we see that everything is back and folded together. And it should be ready. Oh, one last thing. Let's go ahead and, now we can do this here. We want to set the stock point for the gun. This is where, if people are using like virtual stock, this is the point that the gun or that the game thinks the stock is at. So we'll set that to be the pivot point because that's always going to be accurate. So now that the stock is done, I'm going to go ahead and unhide the bolt so that we have a full picture. And we'll go ahead and apply the prefab. The stock is done. What is next? I think that is all we need for moving parts. We can go through and maybe clean up our hierarchy. We don't have a Picatinny rail, and the gun that we based this off of did, so we'll get rid of that. We'll get rid of this Picatinny rail. We can go ahead and look at the foregrip and make sure that this is pretty much accurate to where you would grab the gun at. Go ahead and have a look at the pose. Let me undo that. Move that so it's more central. Bring it back down. So that's where you'll grab the gun. We have a magazine grab trigger. We can move that. That is where you'll basically use your other hand to remove the magazine from the gun. We'll just line that up. We'll give that a 0. That's where your controller would interact with. We can remove some of these extra meshes. We have a back sight, we'll get rid of that. Back sight trigger, that's the flip up sight for the old gun. Chamber, bolt, Oh, we'll move the reload trigger well, although that's going to be for another video where we set up the magazine. So we'll get to that. Oh, and we can also set up the gas out point for our gun. So that's basically where smoke and all the gases come out of the gun. So you can just set that to somewhere inside the gun that makes that hot stuff would be coming out of. And that's pretty much it. So in the next part, we are going to be setting up the magazine for this gun and showing how to add custom enums and all that.